warm welcome to all of you to the OGC Korea Interoperability Day. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Mr. E.R. President of OGC, and Rock President of ISO TC211 for co-hosting this event, and Park Kyung, President, is absent. But anyway, Korean Research Institute for Human Settlements. Instead of, I think, Professor Fraser Taylor for making time available to join us today. I am grateful to all the distinguished representatives from government and intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations in the common interest and goal of promoting geospatial science. My thanks also go to the panelists and moderators for their valuable contributions to this seminar. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, for the last decade, we have invested our effort and resources to approach geospatial society, where human beings' life is happier, safer, more valuable than our current society. It is obvious that considerable progress has been made in enhancement of building spatial data infrastructure in the geospatial society. However, unfortunately, we do not yet witness to the ideal geospatial society. Much of the task and the correlation to achieve the society remain. I believe that global citizens may one day realize the ideal of geospatial society that creation specialists will envisage. Korean government will participate in the process of today's seminar show the Korean government's willing part to this important vision of our geospatial community. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this seminar, national and regional perspective on SDI policy, is significant and appropriate in light of the fact that SDI is the prerequisite for developing geospatial society. Many countries, including Korea, have invested their efforts in building a spatial data infrastructure. And the geospatial standard as a key component of spatial data infrastructure make it easier to access and discover, fuse, and apply spatial information and services. The event is to learn more about how SDIs are being advanced in the context of national powers to encourage improve data sharing. Especially, we focus on OGC, IOS, standards, and related best practices as underpinning context of national and regional SDI policy. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is carefully selected for presentation here, maybe just part of global efforts and knowledge accumulated in the geospatial society. I hope that the seminar will make a substantial contribution to the international collaboration on developing a wide range of exemplary good practices of spatial data infrastructure and the guidelines through exercises such as this seminar. I believe that good practices will contribute to achieve for an ideal geospatial society as our valuable resources. Ladies and gentlemen, geospatial experts. Before I close, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to OGC members for giving us an opportunity of hosting the OGC meeting in 2012 and meeting geospatial specialists on the top level of the world in Seoul. I am confident the OGC TCPC meeting in 2012 will become a very meaningful and memorable meeting, providing not only various experiences on standard of geospatial data, technologies, but also cultural experiences of Korea. For the successful OGC meeting in Seoul 2012, I and my colleagues from MLTM, Ministry of Land Transport and Maritime Affairs, will try to do our best for providing the most comfortable and convenient environment. I hope to see all of you again at the OGC TCPC meeting in 2012. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to commend the effort and the steps from OGC and Smart Korea for successfully organizing this seminar and cooperation with the state of my ministry. I wish you all a memorable stay in Korea and every success in achieving your desired aims through attendance at this seminar. Korea always welcome all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please give him a really big warm round of applause. Thank you. Sorry, I should turn it on. Now I got my battery, so it should work now. Alright, sorry about that. Today's theme, as Mr. Seoul introduced, it's a national and regional perspective on SDI policy and standards. Actually, he's in charge of taking care of Korean side SDI policy and also implementation. Probably many of you are familiar with all the Korean implementation side work regarding the information technologies. So we are really pushing hard to make the standard embedded technologies and services in very short time period. So hopefully we like to show those during the next year this time around. As he made an announcement just a while ago, we will have an OGC TC meeting here in conjunction with the Smart Korea 2012. So please come visit again. I will make an announcement later on. Today's seminar is actually divided into 3 sessions. Each session there is a moderator, and the first part is the sub-theme is about the Americas and Europe case for the SDI implementation. And the second session, after having a coffee break, there will be Australasia. Actually, there is an Asia only named, but actually includes Australia case. So we should have said Australia, Asia, or some other expression. But anyway, it will be moderated by Professor Fraser Taylor. The first one will be moderated by Mr. Olaf Ostensen of ISO TC211. The first two sessions are we will introduce the cases of various countries and continents. But the last one is somewhat more related to how to implement those the architecture related to standard embedded the national spatial data infrastructure. So the final one is the third session is slightly different viewpoints, but this will be taken care by moderated by Mr. Mark Leichhardt from OGC. So we have it's only about 3 hour kind of short workshop, but you will learn various sides of SDI, not just for the policy part, also you will learn the technology part as well, from all over the world. Right, so looks like we are almost ready, so I will pass my mic to Mr. Olaf Ostensen for the first session. Olaf?
Thank you very much, Director General Myung-Kyo Soo and Mark Reichhardt and the other organizations. Many thanks for inviting me to be moderator for this first session here today. I have some introductory slides I want to show. So, oops.
Technology.
Korean, fix that. Well, this is the session, the Americas and Europe, as you have heard. My name is Olaf Magnus Ostensen. I'm the chair of ISO TC211, but I'm also working with the National Mapping Agency in Norway, and we are responsible for coordinating the spatial data infrastructure in Norway. So I will introduce by saying a few words how we have experienced the OGC. Then I would like to go a bit nostalgic. 12 years back. It was in the Reston area. It was the 10th of September 1999, and it was the first public demonstration of what we know now as WMS service. And it was a disaster scenario where the hurricane called Kurt, named after Kurt Buehler, who was the technical director at the OGC at that time, and how that approached the coast of Alabama. And witnessing this demonstration, I immediately went home and called a lot of colleagues, around 100 people from government, local authorities, research and private industry, and then launched the idea, now time is ready for having an internet-based spatial data infrastructure also in Norway. Of course we had we had web viewing services on the net, but it was not standardized in any way. And here we saw the possibility of integrating data sources from many institutions. And this led to the picture we have now. with a fully distributed spatial data infrastructure where organizations, and here you see a few of them, mostly government organizations, from very large ones like the road authorities to very small one dealing with reindeer administration far up in the north. They all provide WMS, WFS services directly connected to the net to be used by our public spatial data infrastructure called Norway Digital, mostly public, and then of course also to the private sector and the common citizen. And a lot of different applications have been built using this infrastructure. And what brought us here, it was actually standards. We started our development of the National Exchange and Data Description Standard in 1982. And it was based upon a Canadian, I think it was British Columbia, and some mining people had an idea. And I was working at the ministry at that time, and I formalized this into a kind of a language, a tag-based language. It's sort of the same idea as we see today in XML, but a different syntax. And this was very popular in Norway, and based upon that we developed national standard for 40 thematic areas since 1987. We have standardized the basic reference data, but also a lot of the thematic data and the environmental data. And the whole country are using and have been pushing for these standards. And then we launched in 2005 the Spatial Data Infrastructure as a voluntary partnership between more than 600 parties now. ISO, TC211 and OGC has cooperated for a long time. ISO TC211 was established in 1994, and I guess OGC at the same time, more or less. And OGC was a founding liaison member from the day one of the committee. And here you see their organizational diagram now, and this is their standards program. They have also other programs. And this standards program is coordinated with ISO TC211 through a joint advisory group. And Jinsu Yu has been chairing that committee up to more or less now. This has been resulting in good cooperation. At the top you will see those ISO developed standards that has become topic volumes in the OGC terminology, and at the bottom level you see the OGC specification that has been developed into ISO standards also. There is no competition here. We complement each other, and ISO as an international body under the International Standardization Organization in Geneva, we are enabling standards from industry, from nations, from a lot of sources, from our liaison members. There is no point for ISO to in a way develop a standard by itself if we can rely upon somebody else to do it. We are enabling, putting a label of authority upon good work from all stakeholders. A few words about Inspire. I know that Peter de Haven covered this better, but I showed this in my presentation earlier. I wanted just to show that OGC and ISO standard fully fit into this. I will not go into the ISO thing now, but here is the technical diagram or the technical architecture of Inspire. And I know Peter will come more back to this, so I can just show here the range of OGC standards that goes into this technical service architecture of Inspire. And of course also TML is fundamental here. So by this I will turn to our speakers, of which we have 3, of which I only see 2. 1 30 seconds away. But shall we then change the sequence a little bit? Louise, are you able to take the first one? So then I would like to introduce the president of, relax and come to the table. So Luis will start. He's the president of PCIDA. He's also worked for the Institute of Geography and Statistics in Brazil. So please, I think we can find you.
Thank you, Olaf, for this introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers of this event for inviting us to talk on behalf of PCIDA, the Permanent Committee for Geospatial Data Infrastructure of the Americas. And what I will try to do here is to give you some perspective on SDI policy and especially standards corresponding to some to the activities that we have been carrying out in the committee activities recently. Just a brief information regarding PCIDA. PCIDA stands for the Permanent Committee for Geospatial Data Infrastructure of the Americas, PCIDA, which was established in February 2000 based on a recommendation of the 6th United Nations Regional Cartograph Conference for the Americas, which was held in 1997. And when Brazil holds the presidency and the executive secretariat for this time period, 2009-2013. PCIDA is currently composed by 24 member countries of the Americas. They are shown in these slides. And in terms of sub-region of the Americas, we have 100% of North America represented in PCIDA, 100% with the 3 countries, United States, Canada, and Mexico. We have 100% of the 7 countries of Central America also represented in PCIDA. We have 92% of South American countries and slightly less representation from the Caribbean region because, as we know, we have many small countries across many islands in the region. And so far we're not able to contact every and each of them in order to be represented in PCIDA. So we have the 3 countries from the Caribbean region in the committee. In terms of PC activities, during the 5th Executive Board of the committee meeting that was held in May last year in New York, the PCIDA Working Group on Planning, GT Plan, was established. This working group on planning is composed by 7 countries representatives: Brazil, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Cuba, Guatemala, and Mexico, under the coordination of Chile with the co-coordination of Canada. So this working group is working on the implementation plan of 7 resolutions issued by the 9th United Nations Regional Cartograph Conference for the Americas, which was held in August 2009 in New York. For you that are not familiar with this United Nations structure, the PCIDA committee is responsible for implementing the resolutions that are issued at the United Nations Regional Cartograph Conference. So far, 3 meetings have been held of this working group. In December 2010 in Rio de Janeiro, in May 2011 in New York, in August 2011 in Rio de Janeiro. And this working group plan covers 7 themes, each one under the responsibility of a country representative. So we have institutional capacity building under the responsibility of Colombia, standards and technical specifications under the responsibility of Mexico, best practices and guidelines for the development of SDI, Canada, innovations in national mapping organizations, Brazil, gather knowledge on topics relevant to the SDI for the region under the responsibility of Guatemala, assess the status of SDI development in the Americas, like Cuba, and technological means for discussions related to SDI from Chile. So we can see out of these 7 teams, there is one specifically dedicated to the standard and technical specifications, which is under the responsibility of Mexico. So what I'm going to do from now on is to talk a little bit of the activities of this subgroup on technical specifications, all that they have been doing, with the goal of this subgroup to carry out activities towards establishing a set of standards and technical specifications that are applicable to the region, complementing the national specifications. Of course, when we say establishing a set of standards and technical specifications, we do not mean to develop new standards and specifications, but basically to investigate what's being used in the region, to investigate the standards that are available, OGC standards, the ISO standards, and how are they being used also in the region, how they can be applicable to the region. For the 2011-2012 activities related to these specifications subgroup, we have listed 6 activities for this 2-year period. Preparation of a vision for integrating geospatial information in the region based on the use of standards and specifications. Basically, this is a document listing and describing all the specifications that are being used and the specifications that exist, covering different areas, and how they can be applicable to the countries of the region. To carry out a diagnosis on the state of the art of standards and specifications in the region, as well as of the requirements for transnational profiles, especially metadata profiles. Preparation of a proposal of core standards and specifications to be used by the countries of the region. Coordination of the participation in organizations and regional initiatives on standardization. Development of manuals to support the daily use of standards and specifications in information management, especially in Spanish and Portuguese. And also to implement a web page regarding all these activities. Regarding the vision, to develop a vision for integrating geospatial information in the region, this slide shows the activities which have been carried out along this year, starting on the definition of content proposal of this document, compiling and analyzing bibliography, drafting the document, that which already has been done, review and update the document among the country members, which is being carried out right now, in order to release and publish the document by the end of this year. Regarding the diagnosis of the state of the art of standards and specifications in the region, also activities carried out along this year, 2011, a questionnaire was designed, questions to a much broader questionnaire concerning 5 of those 7 topics that I mentioned to you, were being designed and developed along this year since January. And so these questionnaire questions were reviewed last March and May, and this questionnaire was applied to the PCIDEA member countries from June to September this year. We are finalizing the analysis of the results of this questionnaire in order to release and publish a report about these results by November 30th. So I'm going to show you some preliminary results of the questionnaire regarding specifically standards and technical specifications. The first important information is that from out of 24 member countries of the Americas, 20 countries responded to the questionnaire. To the question about standards and specifications, if that country, that institution that answered the questionnaire was a producer or user of the standards and the specifications, we can see that out of the 20 countries, 12 are both producer and user of standards. We have 3 that are only users, 4 that only producers, and 1 that didn't reply to the questionnaire. But we can see that majority of the countries of the Americas produce and use the standards and specifications. The second question is if there is an official national entity responsible for producing standards and specifications in that specific country. The large majority, 13 countries out of 20, said that there is an official national entity responsible for the standards in that specific country. For 5 of them, there is no such entity, and 2 didn't reply to the question. How many of them, how many countries participate in international or regional standards organization? Again, 13 out of the 20 participate in these international and regional organizations. 5 do not participate, and remember that 5 was the same number of countries that are only user of standards, and 2 didn't reply. This graph shows the number of countries that produce geospatial information standards in different topics. And so we have at the horizontal axis of this graph all these topics that were covered in this survey. For instance, the most left-hand side, geodesy, geographical names, relief and digital earth model, boundaries, topography, cadastre, hydrography, land use, bathymetry, imagery, and so on. We can see that approximately half of the topics which are in the left are related to reference data and information. And the topics that are on the right-hand side of this graph are more related to thematic data. And so we can see clearly that the situation in the Americas is in a really good shape regarding the preparation and the development of standards for reference data. Whereas this is not true, this is not the same situation regarding thematic data. So that shows us that we need to invest more, we have to pay attention to this, to the development of standards and specification for thematic data production. This graph shows the topic that are corresponding to priorities for standards and specifications production. And so we have on the horizontal axis the number of countries which consider each one of these topics which of high priority for production of standards. We see easily that, let's say, geodesy, geodetic information is the topic that requires the highest priority of all the countries, which is very much understandable considering that the geodetic information is the basic layer on top of which all the other layers of SDI are built. We also have topographia in this graph, which means actually topographic mapping, topographic information, also corresponds to a very basic reference data that is used by any SDI, and which also very important to serve as the basis to represent thematic data. In terms of the production of general standards, which means standards for metadata, interoperability, and data model, we have in this graph showing that the production of metadata is accomplished by 11 countries. In terms of interoperability, 9 countries, and the data model, 10 countries. In terms of which type of standards application is carried out in those specific countries, we see that 7 countries they have the obligation to apply standards. In 3 of them, it's only voluntary, and in 9 countries, they are both obligated and voluntary to use standards and specifications. Regarding the activities in which producers and users apply standards, we see that in most cases, almost all cases, production of the data is the area where standards are very much used. In blue, we have the answers from producers, and in red, the answers from the users. And we have the maintenance of data. We have on the left-hand side of this graph, we have some countries, 9 countries, which use standards for data maintenance. For dissemination of data, we have about 11 countries which produce data which use standards. And so regarding the use of the ISO, OGC, and W3C standards in the region, we see the majority of the countries, 17, adopt ISO standards. We have also 13 countries adopting OGC standards, and so far only 7 countries adopting W3C standards. And as what we could heard from the chairman initial presentation, the OGC and ISO standards are pretty much very compatible and interchangeable. We have also some results regarding the international standard used in DCID member countries. So this graph shows for each of those 20 countries which reply to the questionnaire, if they apply W3C standards, if they apply other standards, OGC in green, ISO in red, and FGDC in blue. And we see clearly that all of those 20 countries, Canada is in really good shape adopting all these flavors of standards. And so another good example is Uruguay, and also UI, and also Guatemala GT. In terms of the use or adoption of ISO standards by each country, this graph shows how, in terms of how many ISO standards are adopted by each country of the region. We see Ecuador is in good shape as well. And this graph shows the ISO standards used by each type of ISO standards, and more than one institution can use in each country. This is why we have more than 20 answers in some cases. But we can see easily, as expected, that the ISO standard for metadata is the most used and adopted one in the region. In terms of the number of countries using OGC standards and specifications, we have the three sets of OGC standards to access and treatment of geographic objects, codification of geographic objects, and implementation of web service. We see that, again, that is pretty much expected, that the WMS service is the standard related to WMS is the most adopted OGC standard in the region. Also, we have some good results for the GML, the WFS as well, and also WBC. Regarding the data interchange format, the OGC GML, KML, and the shapefile format, we see still that in the region, the majority of the interchange data format is still the commercial shapefile, but we are starting to use the KML and also GML in the region. As final remarks, these questionnaire results show the state of art of the standardization in the region in order to promote the proper preparation of standards and technical specifications which will support geospatial data harmonized generation, contributing to its interchange between PC idea members. Acknowledgements. This presentation was prepared by the PC idea presidency based on the work of Luis Gerardo Esparza, which is actually the coordinator of the standards and technical specifications PCIDS subgroup, and also the contributions of Alvaro Monet, Esteban Torra from Chile, and Moema Augusta and Valeria Araújo from IBG in Brazil. We would also like to thank GT Plan for preparing the questionnaire, the PCID Executive Secretary for applying it, and for the 20 PCID member countries which have taken the time and effort to answer it, providing a very rich set of information to support the current PCID activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luis, for a comprehensive study of the usage of standards. I think we can afford a couple of questions, if there are. Is there anyone wanting to ask a question? Yes, sorry, Mark.
The results are really interesting, and I appreciate the granularity of use of specific standards. It's interesting, too, when you look at dispersion between ISO and OGC, some of those are the same standard. Yeah. So it would be interesting to go a little bit further and then create one chart that shows the unique standards and how they're being used. I would love to work with you on that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Actually, as I said, these are just preliminary results now. What the working group is doing is to finalize analyzing all these results. And we are going to prepare a detailed report on that to be released by the end of this year.
Any further questions? Yes, Fraser?
Luis, what action is going to come from this information that you so carefully collected? What processes is PCIDA going to do now to improve the situation? What are your plans?
And actually, one of the ideas behind this questionnaire is to survey the current situation. And based on this, I'm trying to go back here to one slide. So the idea is to generate, let me see here, to prepare a proposal of core standards and specifications to be used in the region. And so it's to have a recommendation for all the countries of the region which are involved in establishing their spatial data infrastructure, that they should be doing that following the same core standards of specifications.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have to rush on. And the next speaker is Prashant Shukla, who is the Director General of the Mapping Information Branch of Natural Resources Canada. Are you loading your presentation now? Yeah, okay. Then I would like to just mention that also PCGIAP has performed a kind of similar study, maybe not the same granularity, but still the same type. And what you see is there is an under-expenditure of the use of standards. The standards organization should really look into that to see what can be done about it.
started loading up, I'll give you a sense of, in terms of my presentation, is that it's a modular presentation that was built upon the other presentations that I gave either at the Industry Exchange Forum or the other day in the GGI forum. What we've done in Canada is really taken a bit of a hybrid approach to the adoption of policies and standards. And the hybrid approach really highlights a few things for us. It highlights the importance of membership on international bodies that deal with policy and standards development. And it also highlights a bit of a policy perspective that is necessary within the Government of Canada to achieve a certain level of... Yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. The translator has a really big trouble to catch the voice, so I will have to change this mic. I think I give you... Oh, really? Sorry about that. Yeah, just
okay. Is that better? So, I forgot where I was at.
sorry about that.
But that'll happen after dinner. Nobody's asleep yet. So I'm off to an inauspicious start, as they say. I'll also flag for you today the role of a particular program that we have in Canada that focuses on geospatial development in terms of policies and standards, and at the same time give you an overview of the Canadian Geospatial Data Infrastructure Project, the context and drivers around our standards development activity, give you a sense of our CGDI policies and standards, how they're evolving, and also give you some perspectives. I'll try to do that in fairly short order because I know that this is theoretically the graveyard time for speakers after lunch. So everybody's usually kind of relaxed and starting to want to take a nap, wondering what the next topic break is. For those of you that don't know what we're doing in Canada on the CGDI and GeoConnections, GeoConnections is a national program, that is, it's run by the federal government. It was the brainchild of the provinces and the territories, who then came to Natural Resources Canada and said, look, what we need is a national government-led program or initiative to help build something called the geospatial data infrastructure. And we also feel that as provincial governments, our resources are flagging, and we feel that with a national approach, we could achieve efficiencies and economies of scale, and that we could all work together in a coalition of the willing and a coalition of the voluntary, which is something that I think is perhaps not uniquely Canadian, but stands quite distinctly apart from other initiatives around the world. And I would like to suggest that we've had a high level of success with that approach. So, many of you know GeoConnections. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. It's a national program. You know what CGDIs are. Some of you know the definitions better than I do. And SDIs, spatial data infrastructures, so I won't bore you with those details, but what I will tell you about GeoConnections is that it went through 3 phases. Started in 1999, the first phase, a 5-year funding arrangement with the federal government. And what we look to do is figure out how to establish a geospatial data infrastructure for Canada. And we focused on the data and the interoperability and the linking of the databases, essentially building the supply of data. The second phase, which was approved by Cabinet, our political leadership, was focused on creating pockets of demand at the local level. Obviously, this is place or location-based type activity, so we focused at the lowest level of the hierarchy in terms of government structures. It was the demand side. Now, a funny thing happened over that 4-year period from 2005 to 2009. Normally in the cabinet process in Canada, you would start your memorandum of cabinet submission the year before the project was about to expire, so our assumptions and theoretical underpinnings around the program were vested in the state of technology at 2004. Halfway through the program, once we got the funding, halfway through the program in 2007, a funny thing came along, and that was the little technological marvel that we call an iPhone. GIS and GPS enabled BlackBerries, and it fundamentally leveled the industry and changed the tectonics of our policy program. And the policy around the program meant that it wasn't as relevant as it was. So we had to figure out what we needed to do for another phase of funding, if we were going to get funding. And we started to work on it. And what we have decided in the 2010 to 15 zone is that we need to tie all of the supply and the demand pieces together. And fundamentally, at an operational level, how do you do it? We've come to the conclusion very clearly that it's about standards and policies. Why, for Canada, are standards and policies important? Well, if you remember back a couple of days, or it seems like a couple of days, to the Canadian landscape, which looks something like this, where you've got pockets of expertise, you have people that are voluntarily contributing to this effort, and you have to provide a compelling rationale and a way of organizing various different perspectives. So when Luis just spoke about how Canada is integrating both ISO standards as well as OGC standards, we're also working on one geology standards, we're looking at a variety of different approaches and standards bodies internationally, because we know that we have to reflect the operational reality for all of the players in the federal system. Don't forget that when you look at the yellow circles here, each yellow circle has a situation that they're managing like the blue circles. So I'll step out and just try to, I'm not yelling, I'm actually quite nice. So Manitoba would have a similar landscape to coordinate as we coordinate here. These guys in Nova Scotia would have different non-governmental stakeholders than we would. So the value proposition is really what drives us in the Canadian context. Value proposition is absolutely essential. Why we believe that a legislative mandate is something that we do not wish to impose, it's because of the rigidity. And once you start down the path of defining frameworks, defining policies, defining standards, there is ongoing, in the Canadian context, I can only speak for the Canadian context, there will be ongoing discussions in terms of trying to figure those out. All of the people that are represented here, like I mentioned to you before, were the coalition of the willing. And their desire was for action. Not simply for the development of frameworks and the development of policies, but real practical, concrete tools that they could work with. But in order to have the tools to work, you also needed the governance structures to work. So we have the governance structures that work. So once the governance structures are in place, we decided that we would focus on the third phase of the GeoConnections National Objectives, on building what's essentially a pan-Canadian framework of policies and standards that would bring about interoperability. But it would bring about interoperability in a way that allowed flexibility and agility, not just for us, but for all of the mapping agencies in the private sector within Canada. So we could adapt to rapid changes in technology, rapid changes in data management practices and approaches, so that we wouldn't have to go back and rewrite a legislative mandate in order to adapt. We also argue that this would make Canadian firms as well as governmental firms more effective, more efficient, and perhaps more competitive in the international marketplace. So this then brings out the context between what we're doing on the technology and standards and how it is we think our focus on standards allows us to create a virtuous cycle of activity. So if we get the standards bit right, we talk about OGC and ISO on geology, we work on the standards bits can inform the technology bits. Technology bits either push or inform the legal or administrative context. Legal and administrative context then informs the operational policy piece as well as the strategic policy piece, which politicians are most interested in. When we talk about the operational policy piece, that's what makes good program design. So if in your countries you have something called an Auditor General, or if you go through policy processes which require policy evaluations to determine relevance and value for money, we believe this virtuous circle helps us in smart program design. So I mentioned technology as a driver for policies and standards. These are some of the issues that we're dealing with. Technology and some of the trends internationally, open data, volunteer geographic information, the open source movement, Web 2.0, you can see them all there, I don't have to read them out for you. The legal and administrative issues that they then impose on us, and they're not a one-to-one correlation, they kind of intersect with one another and they move about, it's more of a matrix relationship. Our ethical and legal practices, confidentiality, security, privacy, intellectual property, copyright. Many of you are dealing with the same types of things. So far, we've managed to address some of these particular legal and administrative challenges. Geospatial privacy through the development of research and guides. We have some best practices on the sharing of confidential and sensitive information. We have an intellectual property and data licensing and best practices framework, and we are developing data quality or enhancing data quality through the framework data guide. Our view is that we use international standards because we can integrate the data and applications across multiple organizations. So remember the slide that I showed you before about the groups within groups and organizers within organizers. And in achieving interoperability through this coalition of the willing, what are the real advantages? Is that we've been able to produce richer and more useful information than single or harmonized data sets can provide. We also have noticed easier export of technology, data, and expertise to others that follow, essentially international standards. And we're of the view that greater export opportunities also means greater export opportunities at a macro level in terms of the economy. And that could potentially mean greater revenues for industry. So, what will we do over the next little while on CGDI standards, on the Canadian Geospatial Data Infrastructure standards? And we're going to continue to evolve standards for our framework data. We will provide geospatial references to physical features across Canada at a variety of scales. We will act as important anchors for developing integrated data sets for analysis and reporting with value-added products, including geomatics applications. And we have been successful as well in terms of 4 framework data layers, which have been accepted by the federal government and imposed as a general standard across the country by the Canadian General Standards Board in the area of geographic names, the National Road Network, Canadian Digital Elevation Data, and Landsat 7 ortho-rectified imagery. So phase 3 will continue the evolution and communication of existing and recently emerging international standards. And we will focus on integrating these at federal, provincial, territorial, and perhaps municipal levels, if we can get down to that level. We are going to be in order to make sure that we do this in the right way, we are going to be raising our level of engagement in the Open Geospatial Consortium. We are going to increase our attention to the activities of the ISO committees. I know that John works with you quite extensively. We also will look to developing, either through Canadian leadership or Canadian support, the concept of bridging interoperability between what may or may not be like or unlike bodies. In Canada, we have a relationship with the geosciences world and the data streams of deep geoscience. I know Australia has a similar sort of situation. And we are going to start thinking about how it is we can take that geoscience data and make sure it is absolutely seamless with the geographic data and frameworks. We believe that it has an innate competitive advantage, not for the geospatial industry, but specifically for our natural resources firms that operate in either oil and gas exploration, mining, minerals. And we also believe that there's a regulatory component to it. Speeding the regulatory process by providing a better understanding of place. So, essentially, we're of the strong view, and in this case, I speak as the co-chair of the Canadian Council on Geomatics, which is the federal provincial body, as well as the Director General of Natural Resources Canada. And there's a shared Canadian view that standards and policies are really the backbone of a successful spatial data infrastructure. We don't believe it's legislation. We don't believe it's the technology. It is, for us, all about the standards and policies that help bring about the interoperability. I think I'll just leave with that.
Thank you, President, for an interesting perspective from Canada. From the Norwegian side, I would say we have been believing in much of the same things as you, the voluntary approach. The next speaker will tell why we also have had to have the regular legislative approach enforced by the European Union. Although Norway is outside the European Union, we have a specific agreement which makes us, or makes it necessary for us also to implement most of the European directives. So we will see if we have some time for more questions after the presentation by Peter de Haar from Ordnance Survey. He is the Director of Products. And we'll talk about Inspire, UK location strategy, and OGC standards. So please, Peter.
Thank you very much. And I'm afraid that most of you know much more about standards than I do. So bear with me. There will be certain things where I will speak nonsense, and then please tell me if I speak nonsense. Okay. Okay. So I would like to talk about Inspire. Which means how we do things in Europe, UK location strategy, how we do things in Britain or in the UK actually. I'll try to explain what the difference is, and how that relates to OGC standards. I will do that for those in rows 4 till the end. I will say 3 things about Ordnance Survey first. Who is Ordnance Survey, and then I'll go into that subject. So who is Ordnance Survey? We are the national mapping agency of Great Britain. We develop mapping data. We do that continuously. We have a big database, 460 million objects and counting, and we keep that continuously updated. Some people say we make thousands of changes every day, and I believe we do. I'm not exactly sure how many. Sometimes it's probably 2,000, sometimes it's probably 10,000 changes per day. It depends on the size of the change, of course, that happens during any one day. This is one of our products. We call them products because that is how our customers, which is what we call our users, use our information. For a Korean audience, this is the location of the Korean embassy in London, mapped to that same level of detail. I'm not going to go really into who we are and why we are. I would like to say something, however, while you read that, maybe about Ordnance Survey's own use of standards before I dive into the rest. And I like to say that we were probably one of the first national mapping agencies that really started to use standards in anger. Really in anger, not as being angry, but as for real. What we did in 2002, more or less, we started to develop this database. We had developed that database and we needed to supply it to our customers. So we decided, instead of using our national own developed exchange format, we will now use the OGC standard GML, and I must say everybody hated us because it was a new standard, it was not so easy to use, but we knew it was the right thing to do, and therefore we pushed it through, and from 2002-2003 onwards we're doing that. We're also a TC, an OGC TC member, and we're doing all kinds of standardization work. But let's go to INSPIRE. So INSPIRE is the European Union Framework Directive, which is a European Union law, which came into force in May 2007. But actually it has been already under development since the early 2000s, and probably maybe even a little bit before that. The thinking around INSPIRE, how can we do spatial data infrastructures in Europe, has been going on already for many, many years. And only now we start to see the first implementations. So this is a complex situation, and we think it is that complex because what we're trying to do is a legislative approach, maybe slightly less different from the approach that Canada is taking, with 27 member nations that all already had all kinds of infrastructures going and had all kinds of systems already in place. So you're basically trying to change existing organizations and existing systems into a new framework. So that's why it takes a long time. The focus is European environmental policy, and there's a very clear outcome that is asked for, and it is the again, European environmental policy is typically one of those policies that doesn't stop at borders. So therefore, you need to be able to share information across borders and across different organizations, and that was why INSPIRE was started. And the goal is to establish one European SDI. Since about a year ago, member states had to have INSPIRE adopted in their national laws. So I think everybody is there by now. Almost everybody is there by now.
Except France, I think.
I think it's very possible except France, but might be actually not only except France, but I'm not even sure. And technically, France could then be fined, get a fine by the European Commission for not transposing this directive into law at the right time. But I'm not sure if that has happened yet, but that could happen. So I'll talk a little bit about those time frames. And it will be implemented according to very detailed technical implementing guidelines and rules. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. So the principles of INSPIRE are clear, that what we should do is we should collect data only once, and we should maintain it at the level where that can be done most effectively. So if there is a rivers organization in a country that manages the rivers, then maybe they should maintain the rivers information and then share that among everybody that needs to use it. It must be done must be possible to combine that spatial data from different sources across the EU, so with all the cross-boundary issues, and share it between many users and applications, not only inside the nation, but again, also between the nations. It must be possible to share that information between all levels of administration, it's basically a similar issue, and the data should be made available in such a way that it should not be available under licensing regime that restricts the use. And specifically important is that it should be easy to discover which spatial data is available already, so that you don't go and collect data again, and basically so that you are not tempted to break the first rule about collecting once. This is the European level geoportal under construction, you should say, which is a geoportal for discovery and viewing of this information. And this is the architecture that Ola already showed us, which is actually a fairly generic SDI architecture. I think the only thing that you may not see in every SDI architecture might be transformation services, because of the need for different nations to work together. You have coordinate systems that are not exactly the same, and you need to be able to translate them into one. But so in the national SDI, you may not see that so much. In an international framework, you will always need to have that. But for the rest, it's fairly standard. I'll come to understand. I won't use your arrows slide because I didn't have that, but it's in my slide. I want it. Inspire is built on a common architecture, and the common architecture is there to make sure that those services are harmonized, that systems are interoperable, and that interfaces are clear and easy to use. What we already also have is various national geoportals in Europe. Of course, this is the French Geoportail, which implements the French spatial data infrastructure, and that actually is also one of the hubs from which information is pushed to the European central infrastructure. Actually, it's the other way around. Pulls it from there, but let's not go into that detail. Again, I don't know so much. The Finnish example, but also as we saw from Norway, as a voluntary contributor, a voluntary member to Inspire, almost, quote unquote. Well, you're trying to.
That's
you're doing
words.
Yeah, it's strong words, and it's my words, but it's. You are following some of the same principles, I would say, or maybe we are following Norway. You will see similar initiatives, for instance, in Switzerland and in other non-EU member states that are actually trying to implement similar kind of principles so that data can be shared. There is, as I said before, there is an extensive list of deadlines for the member states, which give member states a sort of timetable to do their homework. Among others, the regulative process, it needs to be transposed. The European directive needs to be translated into local law, into national law, for each of the member states. Education is required. Metadata needs to be supplied. That's one of the first deadlines that is very close to us at the moment. Implementation of service interface need to happen with viewing and download services, and then of course we need to report back to the Commission, to the European Commission, if we're doing the right thing. And these deadlines, I think the next 2 years are the most interesting years in those deadlines. We've had the transposition of the directive into local law had to happen by the end of last year. What we see now is that the network services that are primarily around the viewing and discovery of data, they need to be implemented by the end of this year for all the member states, and I would be actually very interested if that would actually happen. Because I'm not sure how far everybody is. I'll come a little bit how far we are in Britain. Download services, etc. need to become, and then if you then look at the data that needs to be made available to those services, we've divided that up into 3 annexes. Well, not we, but the European Commission has divided it up in 3 annexes, as they're called, lists of data that are part of the law, and where you could basically say Annex 1 is reference data, such as roads, addresses, ownership data, those kind of things. That needs to be made available fairly first, and then the second group of information that needs to be made available is more the environmental specific data. You will see 2 different timelines there, one for new data and one for existing data, and again that is probably also due to the fact that so many organizations already have data, and just to make sure can connect to existing investment cycles, and because certain things simply take a long time, existing databases actually only need to be made available fully for download purposes, for instance, starting somewhere at the end of 2017, more or less. I don't know the exact date, but new data, so if you create a new database, that needs to be made available already quite a few years sooner. I'll speed up a little bit because I'm between you and coffee, and that's never a good thing. So let's talk a little bit about Inspire and standards. So the Inspire directive is you could see that as a standard that must be implemented. It then also creates certain regulations for network services. They must be implemented. They are legally binding. How they are implemented exactly is not legally binding, but there is a strong recommendation, you could call it, that they should be implemented in a certain way, and there is all kinds of technical guidance for that. That is currently still under development here and there. Some of it is ready by the various implementation groups and groups of experts. And they are, for instance, about, okay, so how do you define an address? How can you define an address across the whole of Europe? How can you define a road across the whole of Europe? Which is not something that is that simple, because actually I know addresses, for instance, in Britain are completely different from addresses in my home nation of the Netherlands, and that's the case. Try to harmonize that is not easy. I'll use this schematic, which I like more. You could say that the Inspire guidelines that are created, they extend the OGC standards and the ISO standards. They use the OGC extension mechanisms to build the other things in the standard that were not necessarily covered by OGC and ISO standards, but they are very closely, extremely closely related. So you would see that on the service layer, and you will see the similar approach in the client layer, and that will then therefore mean that standard OGC and ISO clients should be able to work with Inspire network services and vice versa. Of course, primarily with slightly minimal levels of adaptation. Some of the standards that are used The main OGC standards that are used in Inspire are CSW, WMS, of course, that is also an ISO standard, but we saw that from Ola, how they translate from one to the next. WMTS, WFS, GML, and some city GML is also already in that in that specification for buildings, for instance. There's a profile created there. So those are some of the main ones, but also various other OGC standards are completely embedded into the Inspire technical specifications. So as you can see, there is a very strong link. And that means that also what we see, if we look at the OGC membership, you see that the European membership has actually grown quite substantively, because European members are very interested to understand how to work with OGC standards and how to influence OGC standards, simply because of Inspire. You could see that as a very strong relationship. And thank you to one of Mark's teams for this slide. Although it's, I think, semi-public knowledge. Little public knowledge. Okay, it's on the website. Okay. So let's go on to the location strategy for the United Kingdom. Again, I'll speed up a little bit. In 2008, the United Kingdom published its location strategy called Place Matters. It is a strategy that was signed off by all secretaries of state, so all the top ministers of the United Kingdom. That basically says this is how we are going to do location in Britain. This is how we're going to make location part of policy and execution of policy in the whole of the United Kingdom. It basically says, actually the simplest thing is that it says 5 things, 5 actions where we know what data we have and we avoid to duplicate it. Very closely related to that, one of the Inspire objectives, of course. We will use common reference data, so we know we are talking about the same places. Very clear as well. We can share location-related information easily through a common infrastructure of standards, technology, and business relationships. Standards are there, a very important component. And we will make sure that we have the appropriate skills both among geographic professionals, but also among other professional groups who use location information or support its use. And also there you can see location is so much part of government's business and almost any business, that there is a strong need for education. There's an expression of a strong need for education. And then a 5th point was that we will have a strong leadership and governance to drive through this change that is required. That change then, so the governance of that is that we have the UK Location Council. UK Location Council is a council made up of members from almost every government agency, but also from private industry and from various advisory bodies in the whole of the United Kingdom. And they have an executive board, of which I'm a member, that makes sure that the location strategy is implemented. The program is delivering a location information infrastructure which should deliver on that promise of Inspire and the UK location strategy. So basically it has to deliver Inspire, it has to deliver the technical infrastructure of Inspire, but also it has to deliver a change program to make that happen, because we all know that just telling, or at least in Britain it is like that, in the UK it is like that, just telling an organization this must happen is not really enough. You will have to create incentives, you will have to make it happen, you will have to help people to change, and that is very important. We also saw it as very vital to deliver value back to the United Kingdom through wider access to location information. And we think that by implementing this strategy, more people will be able to access information, and therefore more value will be created. And we should make sure that change program that then gets embedded back into what we call business as usual. That it does not stay something special, but that actually we're starting to use location as business as usual throughout our whole of the economy. The key point of access will be our own data portal, data.gov.uk. Slightly less flashy and geographically oriented than some of the specialized geo portals, but this is not a geo portal. This is a data portal for all of the public sector, and all public sector information will eventually be published through this portal. So it's not only location-based data, but it's also statistical data, health data, data about laws, etc. Ordnance Survey has done some work to change the data portal, to add on to the data portal some geographical search and preview facilities. And we've also supported the data publishing community in the red boxes on the left-hand side to create some to help create some open source software for data publishers, so data publishers can more easily create metadata, and they can create view and download services without licensing cost, but in which cases view and download services that are fully Inspire compliant. That's what it says on this slide. So what we've done is we've taken GeoNetwork and we've taken GeoServer, and we supported the GeoNetwork and the GeoServer communities to create their technology and to make their technology fully Inspire compliant. So we've done that together with our colleagues in France. At the moment, or this is actually 16th of September, the last time we measured, we have 280 Inspire-related data sets already on data.gov.uk, and by the end of so that's about 90% of what it needs to be published in November, which is the deadline that was set. And not every one of them has few services, but we will get there by November, we think, and we already had about 80% of the various organizations publishing all their metadata on that web service. The last two slides that I have, I think are actually the most important ones, and those are around what we're doing to make it interesting. Because talking about standards, talking about spatial data infrastructures, talking about law, legislation, you must do this, is always seen as a negative barrier to implementation of certain things. Many people say, if you say you must, they will try to find 3 ways of why we shouldn't. And many people will say, well, here's the standard. They will try to look for the exceptions to the standard. So what we're trying to do is to create demonstrators that make it as easy as possible and as interesting as possible to our users and to the other entities in government, make it as easy and as interesting as possible to start to use these data infrastructures. And these are 2 of the examples. One is where the Environment Agency is working together with Ordnance Survey, but also with the Met Office, the Meteorological Office, and other agencies in a linked data implementation to be able to show to the citizen what the quality is of the water on the beach. So when they go swimming, that they can understand what the quality is of the water of the beach where they go swimming. It's really a simple application, but it shows the value of combining all this various data straight to the citizen. Very important. And the second one that we worked very hard on was working with the coal authority. And even though we don't have coal mines anymore, or we only have a handful of coal mines that are still in operation, we have 170,000 known mine shafts and probably another 100,000 unknown mine shafts that are a hazard for everybody. They could open up. Maybe there's a thin layer of something on top of it. They could open up, and in many cases they could be very close to the built environment because they were next to a town, but the town grew, and now all of a sudden they are in the town. So if they're in the school, all of a sudden they may be in the school ground. So what we're trying to do is to combine data from the coal authority, from local authorities, from the geological survey, from national park authorities, etc., to combine that information and to really create an intelligent picture for especially local authorities to know where there might be certain hazards. And again, it is one of those ways of demonstrating that spatial data infrastructures add real value to the community. And I'd like to end with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are a bit late. We started also a bit late, so can we allow for a question or two to the two last speakers before we? Yes. So, are there any? We have seen three quite different presentations. I think the survey of the situation in Americas, the advanced voluntary structure in Canada, and then the advanced standards-based structure also in Europe, but enforced by legislation now. Although there are, of course, voluntary underneath that in several of the countries. Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, about the Inspire project. So I have one question about the Inspire project. So regarding the scope of the data about the Inspire project. So you are dealing only the data from governmental organization like a national mapping agency. As far as I know, so for example, in France there is a Michelin company who are producing geospatial data. So it is within the coverage of the project.
The Inspire is national. It only applies to data collected by government, but government at every level. So local government up to central government, but only government.
But there is a provision in the regulation that it shall allow for third parties to include if they follow the same rules. So that will be monitored. So there is a question in the monitoring that you have to report every 3 years. To what extent have you been able to integrate or industry, for instance, in your achievements?
Thank you. You know much better than I do.
Yes, please.
I have a question for both Peter and Prashant, because they both are faced with the same problem. How do you get people to participate in the process? Now for Prashant, we have a very good coalition of the willing, but how do you encourage those people who are either unwilling or unable to participate? And for Peter, you've already touched on this. You've got legislation which says you must, and the usual reaction is, I will not. So what sort of incentives can you give? You mentioned one, but I see that both approaches have strengths and weaknesses. In your view, what are the weaknesses of the legislative approach? And for Prashant, what are the weaknesses of the voluntary approach? And can we arrive at a hybrid, which may in fact be better than either one or the other?
What we're trying to do in Europe, I think, is both sorry for the expression, both a stick and a carrot. Both positive incentives, that is the carrot that you hold in front of the donkey that is pulling your cart, yeah, this is the expression, or a stick with which you hit them. The stick can be very substantial. The European Commission is known for its very substantial fines. Millions and millions and millions of euros have to be paid if you do things wrong. The carrot is something that we are trying to create with for instance, these pilots, making them interesting. I think the downside of the legislative approach to say that is that it leads to very rigid structures. It leads to very rigid architectures and very rigid standards. And sometimes these standards will therefore not evolve, and maybe not the standards, but the implementations of the standards will not evolve quickly enough. So what we see currently, for instance, with the push for standards around linked data, it's very difficult to get those implemented into the inspired legislative framework as also being acceptable, while they could even probably potentially save member states over time significant amounts of time and money. So it's that's the negative side of it. The positive side of it, of course, is that you have to, and therefore you will. It's simple.
I would have to say that